Rome was founded in 8th century BC as a small city-state and became a republic by 6th century BC, making Rome a dominant power in the Mediterranean basin for over 500 years. Ancient legends say that twin brothers Romulus and Remus migrated from Greece to Italy and were raised by a shoe-loaf. By 753 BC, Romulus founded Rome. Etruscan people dominated Italy from 8th to 5th centuries BC, developing Italy politically and economically. Etruscan dominance eventually declined, and in 509 BCE, Romans disposed of their last Etruscan king, replacing the monarchy with an aristocratic republic, with the Republican Constitution, which gave two councils power. Councils were elected by a wealthy class, patrician. The Senate, made up of aristocrats, devised the councils and represented the interests of patricians, but not the common people who were the plebeians.
Tensions grew between plebeians and patricians, and plebeians threatened to secede from Rome and form their own state in 5th century BCE. To prevent this, patricians allowed plebeians to elect 10 officials called tribunes to represent them in government. Rome expanded power and influence, changing Rome from a small city-state to a powerful empire. Romans expanded by consolidating their rule in Italy, establishing military colonies through generosity towards others, exempting conquered peoples from taxes, and allowing them to maintain rights as long as they did not form alliances with societies outside of Rome. Rome then moved on to expand to the Mediterranean, clashing with Carthage, the dominant power in North Africa, engaging in conflicts with them from 264 to 146 BCE. Known as the Punic Wars. Roman expansion also caused conflict with the Antigonids and Seleucids, fighting 5 wars against them from 215 to 148 BCE, defeating them and becoming the dominant power in the Mediterranean.
Class tensions grew in the Roman Empire as wealthy elites organized large plantations known as latifundia, with slave labor at a lower cost than owners of smaller lands. Roman social reform brothers Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus worked to limit the amount of land individuals could hold in 2nd century and 1st century BC, but wealthy elites had them assassinated to keep their large land holdings. Gaius Marius, a Roman general, supported social reforms and marched on Rome in 87 BCE. Lucius Cornelius Sulla, a Roman general, seized Rome in 83 BCE, ruling with a reign of terror for 5 years. And when he died in 78 BCE, he had imposed a conservative legislation that had weakened Rome. Nephew of Marius, Julius Caesar gained public support as a general and led an army to Gaul, expanding the empire.
Conservative elites did not want Caesar as a leader, but in 46 BCE, Caesar claimed title as dictator of life for the Roman Empire and centralized military and politics and redistributed lands to his supporters and made projects to beautify Rome and employ people. Caesar's government alienated elites, and in 44 BCE, a group of elites attacked and stabbed Caesar in a public forum.
I am Julius Caesar, and on this glorious Roman day, we will be talking about...
Octavian, Caesar's nephew, took rule in 27 BCE, and the Senate gave him the name Augustus, and he consolidated rule on the Roman Empire, forming an imperial government lasting for 300 years. Augustus had a monarchy disguised as a republic.
Augustus' reign started the Pax Romana, which means Roman peace, where for 2 centuries almost all political and economical problems disappeared. During Pax Romana, the Roman government constructed the 12 Tables, which was a basic code law for the Roman citizens.
Poverty in Rome became a problem when unemployed masses started to join private armies of power-seeking generals. Roman thinker Marius Tullius Cicero drew great inspiration from Greek Stoics, helping to establish Stoicism as the most prominent school of moral philosophy in Rome. Jewish communities prevailed in different regions, causing religious tensions surfacing when the Roman Empire expanded to the Mediterranean.
Early Christians formed a community around Jesus of Nazareth in 4 BCE, but Romans saw Jesus as threatening, so they executed him in 30 CE. After Jesus' death, Christianity grew even more, and devoted followers wrote the New Testament, which they combined with the Jewish Old Testament to form the Bible. Paul of Tarsus was an advocate of Christianity, attracting converts from Judaism to Christianity. He was executed in 53 CE.
From king to republic, republic to empire, they overthrew the king because the republic was their desire. The patricians had the money, and the plebeians had the chores. Equality in the constitution saved Rome from class wars. Rome wanted to expand. Outsiders were weary.
but Rome took them out with a powerful military, and just like that an empire they were.
After it was centralized by Julius Caesar, Octavian replaced Caesar after he was killed. It was hard to live up to, but his shoes were proper filled. Octavian became Augustus because he was so divine. He stabilized the land and led Rome on an incline. The Mediterranean became a Roman lake, protected by the navy. No trade was at stake. Some lived by Greek philosophies, some by religious salvation. All in all, Rome was united despite religious congregations.
In 139 BCE, Chinese Emperor Han Wudi sent Zheng Xin to lands west of China to find allies for the Han Empire. He returned with no allies but gained intelligence on other societies and gave the emperor the idea to establish trade with China and Bactria through India. Han Wudi liked this idea and made campaigns from 102 to 98 BCE to construct the Silk Roads. Societies in Eurasia, North Africa, China, and the Mediterranean basin engaged in trade and integrated their economies, developing these classical societies. The making of safer roads, bridges, and empires that bordered each other closely dropped risk of trade. Trade volume also increased through the discovery of the monsoon system, in which winds blow southwest in the summer and northeast in winter. The overland Silk Road started in China, then branched out to north and south, came together in westernmost China, then continued west through Bactria, Syria, and Arabia, ending in Mediterranean ports of Turkey. Silk roads also included maritime lanes linking the Indian Ocean basin and the Mediterranean.
Silk and spices from Southeast Asia, China, and India traveled to Central Asia, Iran, and the Roman Empire. India exported cotton, pearls, and ivory. Spices had great value because they served as flavoring and had use in drugs, anesthetics, and perfumes. Some individuals made very long journeys along the Silk Roads, but most merchants usually handled long-distance trade in stages. In the Arabian Sea, Persians, Egyptians, and Greeks dominated maritime trade, and Romans controlled the eastern and western regions of the Mediterranean. Merchants, missionaries, and travelers carried their religion to oasis towns along the Silk Road, leading to the spread of Buddhism and Hinduism. In 3rd century BCE, Buddhism was established as a main faith in northern India, and through long-distance trade it spread to Iran, Central Asia, and Southeast Asia, becoming a prominent faith in these regions. During 2nd and 3rd century CE, Christian missionaries worked to spread their religion, and by late 3rd century CE, Christian communities became present in the Mediterranean basin, Mesopotamia, and Iran.
Also spread Manichaeism, deriving from a prophet Mani, who was Zoroastrian, who blended elements of different religions, including Christianity, Zoroastrian, and Buddhism. During the 2nd and 3rd century CE, Han and Roman empires had an outbreak of smallpox, measles, and the bubonic plague. The Roman population dropped from 60 million in the 1st century CE to 40 million in the 3rd century. In China, the population dropped from 60 million CE to 45 million by 600 CE. The Han Empire declined due to internal problems such as factions or marriage alliances between power-seeking elites. Landowners gained influence in government by reducing their taxes, which would place a very large burden on peasants.
In 184 CE, peasants formed the Yellow Turban Rebellion and was quickly suppressed but showed internal decay of the Han Empire. The Han Emperor had become a puppet and the government was being controlled by wealthy landowners who established themselves as generals. In 220 CE, the generals abolished the Han dynasty, dividing the empire into 3 kingdoms. While generals were fighting for power, nomadic peoples formed communities and adopted the customs of China. Many people abandoned Confucian principles, turning to Buddhism and Taoism. In the Roman Empire, generals and elites also fought for power of the throne, and the empire faced problems because it was so large and it became unmanageable. Roman Emperor Diocletian attempted to divide the Roman Empire in two. He brought Rome's army under imperial control and strengthened imperial currency to stabilize the economy.
When Diocletian retired in 305 CE, Constantine claimed emperor and created a new capital, Constantinople, uniting the Roman Empire in 330 CE. Constantine's successors faced problems with external threat in 4th and 5th century CE from Germanic peoples. Nomadic Visigoths moved to regions bordering the Roman Empire, and in 4th century, Huns from Central Asia invaded Hungary and Italy. Huns disrupted the Roman Empire, allowing Germanic peoples to easily invade and establish settlements in the western half of the empire. In 476 CE, German general Ottweiser deposed of the last Roman emperor in the western half. Germanic peoples developed Roman laws and traditions, and Christianity prevailed, becoming the official religion of the Roman Empire in 380 CE.
in the time of the 2nd century. The Silk Roads went on both land and sea. From Egypt to China, traders traveled to and fro. On the seas, the monsoon winds helped the traders go. Religions were spread by the Buddhists, Hindus, Christians, as well as the plague, which left the traders itching.
The Han Dynasty was weakened by disease, as well as the Roman Empire, which didn't fall with ease. The Roman Empire was divided in two, the wealthy east and the poor west, so invaders went right through. So the poor western district fell, which left the east alone. Now the small empire called Anatolia their home.
In 1325, a Moroccan scholar, Ibn Battuta, traveled to Mecca to make pilgrimage, then to India, serving as a qadi or judge for the Sultan of Delhi. After 8 years in India, Battuta continued his journey and by the end had traveled over 73,000 miles. From 1000 to 1500 CE, societies recovered from the bubonic plague and revived cross-cultural interactions, moving toward global interdependence. Merchants brought luxury goods through the Silk Roads and brought steel, coral, and building materials through the sea lanes of the Indian Ocean. As trade increased, ports grew rapidly, like the city Malacca, which became the principal port of trade in eastern Indian Ocean by the end of the 15th century. Venetian traveler Marco Polo served diplomatic missions for the Great Khan of China in 1271. On his return to Venice in 1295, he was captured. While in prison, he told great tales of trade and travel, influencing European readers. During the 13th century, Mongol forces disrupted Eurasia, destroying cities but laying the political foundation for a surge in long-distance trade. In the 1240s, Pope Innocent IV invited Mongols to convert to Christianity and help Europeans against Muslims, but they refused.
In 1287, Mongol Khan of Persia wanted to invade Muslim Southwest Asia, so he sent the Christian priest Robin Sama to ask the Pope and Europeans for help, but they declined. Then in 1295, the new Khan of Persia converted to Islam, stopping any possibilities for an alliance with Europe. Islam spread through Sufi mystics who were missionaries that emphasized piety and devotion to Allah and tolerated traditional deities. Christian missionaries attracted converts in Sicily, Spain, and the Balkan region, but did not succeed in attracting converts in China. John of Montecorvino was an active Christian missionary in China in 1291, and although he was well liked, he attracted few Asian peoples to Christianity. New technology like the magnetic compass allowed easier maritime travel, and commercial crops like citrus fruits and cotton spread to regions around the world. Muslims introduced sugarcane to Europe, and soon Europeans had plantations for sugar organized on Mediterranean islands.
During the 14th century, bubonic plague erupted in epidemics in Asia, Europe, and North Africa. Beginning in the 1340s, the bubonic plague spread in ports along the Silk Roads. From 1300 to 1400, China's population dropped by 10 million and Europe dropping by 19 million. However, India escaped effects of the plague, and during the plague, its population grew by 8 million. In 1300 CE, significantly cooler temperatures led to crop failure and famine, adding to the struggle with disease epidemics. In 1368, the Mongol Yuan dynasty collapsed and Emperor Hongwu of China established the Ming dynasty. The Ming dynasty was tightly centralized, and Hongwu relied on mandarins and eunuchs, officials who oversaw local governments. The Ming dynasty worked to revive irrigation and manufacturing, along with traditional Chinese customs.
In the late 15th century, Western Europe strengthened societies through taxes and maintenance of large armies with gunpowder weapons. In Spain, Fernando of Aragon and Isabel of Castile married in 1469, uniting the two wealthiest Iberian realms. From 14th to 16th centuries, the Renaissance or rebirth occurred, and artists and architects drew inspiration from classical Greece and Rome. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Masaccio and sculptures like Donatello and Michelangelo depict the human form in art. Humanist scholars studied ancient literature, history, and moral philosophy, encouraging classical culture rather than medieval ideas.
In 1405, Ming Emperor Yanglei sent Admiral Zheng He to lead expeditions to establish a Chinese presence in the Indian Ocean basin. In 1433, Zheng He's expeditions ended due to a need for finances and agriculture. Europeans also ventured into seas to spread Roman Catholic Christianity. In 1415, Prince Henrique of Portugal embarked on a campaign to spread Portuguese influence. As a result, the Portuguese captured the Moroccan city of Ceuta, colonized the Madeiras and the Azores Islands, as well as the Canary Islands, collaborating with the Italians to make these islands into sugarcane plantations. The Portuguese delivered 12 million enslaved Africans to North America, South America, and the Caribbean to work in their plantations. By the 15th century, the Portuguese began to search for a sea lane from Europe around Africa and into the Indian Ocean. In 1488, Bartolomeu Diaz sailed from Europe to the Indian Ocean, and in 1497, Vasco da Gama sailed around the Cape of Good Hope up the East African coast, arriving in Calicut in 1499. Meanwhile, Fernando and Isabel of Spain financed an expedition for the Genoese mariner Christopher Columbus to sail west to reach Asia. He departed in 1492 and returned to Spain, however, with no gold, silk, or even spices, but told of islands that he had reached near Asia, which was actually North America.
Hey, is this Asia?
No.
Yeah, it is.
This is not Asia.
Yes, it is.
By the end of the 15th century, other mariners began expeditions as well, exploring the Caribbean and the Americas.
From Pacific to Atlantic, and all that's in between. Trade was the hive of the 10th and 15th centuries, but the Mongols were the thugs that conquered everyone, and Genghis Khan made sure that he had some fun. All while missionaries launched a bunch of campaigns, religion wasn't the only thing that people had exchanged.
Crops and technology was shared throughout the land, as well as a plague which was shared by shaking hands. China was recovered during the Ming, and Western Europe had recovered by state building. The Renaissance was a product, and people got creative, and people started exploring. That's when Columbus found the natives.
As a result of globalization, there was a transformation in social, political, and economic contours. It advanced technology, expanded international trade, and led to the establishment of new global enterprises, as well as governments and organizations that were in favor of market-oriented economies.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them. Because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
The global economy came into public view after the collapse of communism in the 90s. This involved free trade, which is the freedom of state-imposed limits and constraints on trade between borders. The GATT and the WTO signed an agreement, which resulted in the WTO taking over. This settled disputes between international trade. The Little Tigers developed, which is an alliance between Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, and Taiwan. The European Union began in 1957 with the Treaty of Rome, and it included 6 nations. This union led to the adoption of the euro in 1999. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, the OPEC, was established in 1960 to raise global oil prices. Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the ASEAN, in 1967 added 5 members to accelerate economic development and promote political stability.
The North American Free Trade Agreement was formed in 1993, consisting of the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and was the second largest free trade zone in the world. The American Barbie doll was a threat to Islamic values, and instead Muslims had Sarah, their own doll, wanting to maintain their own cultural traditions. Global communications minimize social, economic, and political isolation. Global population increased during the 20th century from 500 million in 1650 to 2.5 billion in 1950. After 1950, fertility rates fell and AIDS significantly dropped populations. Scientists and writers wrote books discussing physical limits of the Earth, expressing pessimistic views about the Earth's biodiversity. In China, population control was a highly politicized issue, and the United Nations created China's one-child policy.
Our children are so beautiful.
Wait, but what about that one-child policy? They're gonna take away our little girl.
Oh, don't take our little girl!
Swear.
No!
Oh,
Hand it
sad
over.
life. Sad
Law.
life.
One child only.
But me, I just took our little baby child. Slavery was abolished worldwide in the 1960s. This movement of abolition included international trafficking as well. Today, trafficking is still a global problem though. In the 1980s, HIV/AIDS was discovered in San Francisco, and most people were concerned because it was a heritable STD. HIV/AIDS affected Africa mostly and set the continent back economically. Terrorism was a huge problem. A prime example is 9/11, when 3 planes under Islamic hijacker control caused the Twin Towers, also known as the World Trade Center, to collapse and a civilian plane to crash into a field, though it was aiming for the Pentagon.
Afghanistan was established in 1996 as an Islamic state under strict law. In 2001, U.S. forces invaded Afghanistan and drove out the Taliban and Al-Qaeda under George Bush command.
This is our president, George W. Bush. He cooperated with Britain and made the Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003 eventually led to the capture of Saddam Hussein. In order to cope with global issues, non-governmental organizations were formed, such as the Red Cross and Greenpeace for medical humanization causes and environmental aid. The United Nations, founded in 1945, superseded the League of Nations, and it was really successful. The UN established the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which forbade any form of cruel, unusual punishment. Contentious issues paralyzed the UN and the organizations affiliated with it. After World War II, women gained more rights in highly industrialized states, and the U.S. Civil Rights Act of 1964 forbade any sex discrimination.
Unfair treatment restricted rights of women in the developing world, resulting in most Muslim women being literate and confined at home. In South Asia, women were more effective political leaders, and the UN launched a Decade for Women program in 1975. Urbanization, a tremendous flow from rural to urban setting, was a difficult transition for people. 10 million immigrants, mostly from Mexico, migrated to the United States in 1960. Today, foreigners make up half the working population. About 130 million people live outside their country's citizenship. After World War I, tourism increased around the world, and today, travel and tourism is the largest industry in the world.
Well, this is a story all about how the global economy got flipped, turned upside down, and I'd like to take a minute, just sit right there. I'll tell you how age became a power trait everywhere. After communism and global corporations, countries made unions that helped economic globalization. Barbie was the girl of the world, and still is, and cultures were shared by media and showbiz.
Population pressure was a problem out of hand, which caused and still is causing environmental impact. HIV and AIDS became a global disease, then came global terrorism, which led to NYC. Feminism and gender equality now is accepted. Now we have women leaders, so the world is perfected.